head, and suspended therefrom was what appeared to be a huge pendulum, such as one might see on antique clocks. While I gazed at it, I fancied that I saw it move, ever so slightly. I watched it for some minutes, somewhat in fear, but more in wonder. Then a noise attracted my notice, and looking to the floor, I saw several enormous rats. They had issued from the pit, with ravenous eyes allured by the scent of the meat. It required much effort and attention to scare them away from the food. When I again cast my eyes upward, what I saw confounded and amazed me. The sweep of the pendulum had increased in extent by nearly a yard. But what mainly disturbed me was the idea that it had perceptibly descended. I now observed, with what horror it is needless to say, that its lower extremity was a crescent of glittering steel, about a foot in length from horn to horn, the horns upward, and the under edge evidently as keen as that of a razor, and it hissed as it swung through the air, inch by inch, with a descent only appreciable at intervals that seemed ages. Down and still down it came. Days passed ere it swept so closely over me as to fan me with its acrid breath. I prayed for its more speedy descent. I grew frantically mad and struggled to force myself upward against the sweep of the fearful scimitar. And then suddenly I fell calm and lay smiling at the glittering death as a child would at some rare bauble. I saw that the crescent was designed to cross the region of my heart. It would fray the serge of my garment. It would return and repeat its operations again and again. But the fraying of my garment would be all that for several minutes it would accomplish. To the right, to the left, far and wide, down, steadily down it crept, with the shriek of a damned spirit, to my heart, with the stealthy pace of the tiger. I alternately laughed and howled as the odor of the sharp steel forced itself into my nostrils. Down, relentlessly down. It vibrated finally within 3 inches of my bosom. 10 or 12 sweeps would bring the steel in actual contact with my clothing. And then, with this observation, there suddenly came over my spirit all the keen, collected calmness of despair. For the first time in many hours, or perhaps days, I thought of the rats. They had been literally swarming around the low framework upon which I lay. They were wild, bold, and ravenous, their red eyes glaring upon me as if they waited for motionlessness on my part to make me their prey. What food, I thought, have they been accustomed to in the pit? They had devoured, in spite of all my efforts to prevent them, all but a small remnant of the contents of the dish. Although my plan was scarcely sane, I proceeded at once to attempt its execution. With the particles of the oily and spicy meat which now remained, I thoroughly rubbed the restraining binding wherever I could reach it. Then I lay breathlessly still. At first, the ravenous animals were startled and terrified at the change. Observing, however, that I remained without motion, 1 or 2 of the boldest leapt upon the framework and smelt at my bonds. This seemed the signal for a general rush. They leapt in hundreds upon my person. The measured movement of the pendulum disturbed them not at all. Avoiding its strokes, they busied themselves gnawing the anointed bindings. They pressed, they swarmed upon me in ever accumulating heaps. They writhed upon my throat. Their cold lips sought my own. I was half stifled by their thronging pressure. Disgust, for which the world has no name, swelled my bosom and chilled with a heavy clamminess my heart. Yet 1 minute, and I felt that the struggle would be over. Plainly, I perceived the loosening of the strapping. I knew that in more than one place it must be already severed. With a more than human resolution, I lay still. Nor had I erred in my calculations, nor had I endured in vain. I at last felt that I was free. But the stroke of the pendulum already pressed upon my bosom. It had divided the serge of my garment. Twice again it swung, and a sharp sense of pain shot through every nerve. But the moment of escape had arrived. At a wave of my hand, my deliverers hurried tumultuously away. With a steady movement, I slid from the embrace of the bindings and beyond the reach of the scimitar. I was free! Free! But still in the grasp of the Inquisition. I had scarcely stepped from my wooden bed of horror when the motion of the hellish machine ceased, and I beheld it drawn up. My very motion was undoubtedly watched. Free! I had but escaped death in one form of agony, to be delivered unto worse than death in some other. With that thought, I rolled my eyes nervously on the barriers of iron that hemmed me in. I observed that the figures of the fiends upon the walls had now assumed a startling and most intense brilliancy. Demon eyes of a wild and ghastly vivacity glared upon me from 1,000 directions. It was unreal. While I breathed, there came to my nostrils the breath of the vapor of heated iron. A suffocating odor pervaded the prison. I panted. I gasped for breath. I shrank from the burning metal to the center of the cell. Amid the thought of the fiery destruction that impended, the idea of the coolness of the pit came over my soul like balm. I rushed to its deadly brink. I threw my straining eyes below. The glare from the enkindled roof illuminated its inmost recesses. Yet for a wild moment did my spirit refuse to comprehend the meaning of what I saw. At length it burned its way into my soul. Oh, for a voice to speak. Oh, horror! Oh, any horror but this! The heat increased rapidly, and once again I looked up. There had been a second change in the cell, and now the change was obviously in the form. The room had been square. The fearful difference quickly increased with a low, rumbling sound. The apartment was shifting its form into that of a rectangle. Death, I screamed! Any death but that of the pit! Fool! Might I not have known that into the pit was the object of the burning iron to urge me? And now closer and closer grew the walls. I shrank back, but the closing walls pressed me resistlessly onward. At length, for my seared and writhing body, there was no longer an inch of foothold on the firm floor of the prison. I struggled no more, but the agony of my soul found vent in one long, loud, and final scream of despair. I felt that I tottered upon the brink. Then suddenly there was a discordant hum of human voices. There was a loud blast as of many trumpets. The fiery walls rushed back. An outstretched arm caught my own as I fell, fainting into the abyss. It was that of General LaSalle. The French army had entered Toledo. The Inquisition is in the hands of its enemies.